Mountain Man steps up to pregnant widow. Discover the transformative promise that amazes everyone. Jake's weathered hands gripped the shovel as he struck the earth, ruminating on the solitude he had come to cherish. The mountains loomed around him, their jagged peaks piercing the sky, offering a cold comfort in his grief. At 35, he was a man molded by hardship, his father's sudden death forging a bond with the land and an independence that now suffocated him. The invisible chains of duty weighed heavy on his heart, a passed-down legacy demanding respect for hard work and family bonds, yet leaving him an island in his own life. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the shadows of his father's absence cast a long silhouette over his solitude. Across town, Sarah stood at the fence of her crumbling ranch, determination etched on her face. A widow at 28, she bore the weight of expectation and loss. The land held memories of laughter and love, but now its promise was entangled with foreclosure and whispers of doubt. Jake had learned from a distance how the townsfolk scoffed at her. They had lost faith in her when she most needed it. The struggle to keep her home was a relentless tide, washing ashore the remnants of her broken dreams. Each day she fought harder against fate, her desperation evident in the tightening lines around her eyes. As he dug deeper, Jake couldn't shake the thought of Sarah. He had watched her struggle with the fence, shoulders hunched against the weight of her plight. Something stirred in him, a recognition of shared sorrow that tugged at the edges of his reclusive nature. He contemplated the unspoken promise of support, the intertwining of their fates in a place crafted by unyielding challenges. But doubt clawed at his throat like thorns, a worry that stepping outside his fortress of solitude would compromise not just Sarah's dreams, but his own. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With this anxiety throbbing in his chest, Jake finally stepped toward her, compelled by an impulse that felt foreign and liberating in equal measure. Need a hand? The words left his mouth like arrows, aiming straight for the heart of her predicament. He felt the weight of both their unspoken fears as she met his gaze, vulnerability swirling in those stormy eyes. Together, they worked, side by side, the silence of labor concealing the emotional turbulence that thundered beneath their skin. In the gathering dusk, laughter mingled with shared grief, both of them finding an unexpected camaraderie that defied the choking grip of sorrow. But as prospects began to glimmer, the bank's foreboding threat loomed larger. A gathering was called, where whispers turned into accusations. What does she know about running a ranch? The words stung, poisonous criticisms aimed at Sarah, but they cut equally deep into Jake, as doubts about his role gnawed at him. Just as he thought their fragile alliance might build into something more, a rival's voice erupted with personal attacks, a cruel blade of bitterness aimed at their tender connection and the promise of hope they strived to nourish. Tension crackled in the air. Jake could feel it constricting around him like a trap. He clenched his fists, fear and indignation roaring inside, teetering on the edge of uncertainty. He would need to confront the deepest question lurking in his heart. Could he sacrifice his silence for this woman's fight? Their destinies were tangled now, an intricate web of grief and aspiration, but the wind of peril howled fiercely, urging him to choose before it swept them both away. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he caught sight of the rival, his words still echoing in his mind like a bell tolling for a lost cause. The man dripped disdain, the townsfolk leaning in, eager for the spectacle. The venomous remarks aimed at Sarah, questioning her capabilities, became a reflection of Jake's own insecurities. He could feel the heat radiating from his chest, but as the townspeople shifted their gaze between him and Sarah, doubt crept in, a whisper echoing that he was just another outsider, a drifter wielding a flicker of hope for a woman they deemed unworthy. Yet something within him stirred. A fierce determination crystallized in the pit of his stomach. This isn't just about them, he thought, grappling with the fear tightening like a vice around his throat. He glanced at Sarah, her chin raised defiantly, though her eyes brimmed with vulnerability, reminding him of his own struggles. The ire of a world that often turned its back on those it deemed helpless. Enough! Jake's voice rang out unexpectedly, cutting through the murmur of doubt and anger. The faces turned to him, surprise mingled with contempt. What she knows doesn't matter as much as her will to try. You talk of experience, but have you ever shown courage in the face of adversity? The room fell silent. Jake could hear his heart pounding in his ears, the adrenaline coursing through his veins, pushing him forward. This moment felt like a threshold. For the first time, his resolve could shatter the chains of isolation he had worn for years. He wasn't just a mountain man. He could be the ally Sarah needed, the friend who stood firm when the winds howled. The rival opened his mouth to respond, but stopped, unable to meet the fierce light in Jake's eyes. That fleeting moment, modeled by the tension coiling tighter, felt like a revelation. Jake was aware that he had not only defended Sarah, but had also unearthed a piece of himself he had buried under layers of solitude, the part that craved connection and purpose. Returning to their task, the two exchanged a glance, an unspoken acknowledgement that passed between them, a fragile bridge built on mutual understanding and strength. As daylight faded, they worked harder, rhythmically pulling weeds and mending fences. Unexpected laughter broke the tension, weaving a narrative distinct from their pain. In these moments of labor, shadows of doubt began retreating into the background. But the weight of reality remained, the growing stack of bills at the bank and the ever-looming threat of losing the ranch. The more they fought, the clearer the stakes became. They were up against more than just the shifting tide of public opinion. They were battling personal demons that threatened to tear apart their flicker of hope. Days turned into weeks, and as they faced each challenge, Jake felt a shift within. He discovered hidden competencies. He was adept at organizing, strategizing their approach to save the ranch while secretly planning his own future, one that could include the unexpected companionship that had bloomed amid the weeds. Yet, the specter of his past still loomed, and he grappled with the idea of fully committing to a life intertwined with Sarah. What if he failed her? What if stepping into the light meant confronting his most profound fears? On the eve of a crucial meeting with the bank, storms brewed on the horizon, mirroring the tempest within him. As shadows stretched across the land, Jake reached for the heavy door of his solitude and considered finally stepping through. The stakes were higher than ever, but so too was the chance for belonging. Yet the question reverberated. Could he face the depths of his own vulnerabilities to forge a future not just for Sarah, but for himself as well? He took a deep breath, unsure of the answer, but prepared to find it. The moment was drawing near. Beyond the horizon, it loomed larger, the chance for redemption and connection. Would Jake rise to meet it, or would his fears pull him back into the abyss? The night held its breath, waiting for his decision. As dawn broke, Jake stood at the edge of the ranch, eyes transfixed on the horizon, where the sun broke free from the grasp of night. Today was more than just a meeting. It was a reckoning. Every moment spent with Sarah, and every word exchanged in defense of her, echoed in his mind, igniting a fire of determination. This was the day he would confront not just the bank, but the fear that had long held him captive. He had spent the previous night rehearsing his arguments, but now, as dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Jake realized that it wasn't about the specifics he would present. It was about showing up, not just for the ranch, not just for Sarah, but for himself. He felt the thump of his heart as the weight of his decisions settled into the marrow of his bones. "Jake?" Sarah's voice broke through his reverie, drawing him back. There was strength in her gaze, a quiet confidence that reminded him of why he was fighting. Her presence was both a comfort and a challenge, Together, they were more than mere survivors. They were partners on a precarious road. "I'll bring my bravest self," he replied, surprising himself with the conviction in his tone. It felt good, like the muscle memory of someone who had long been stagnant, beginning to flex again. As they made their way to the bank, the tension coiled around him. He could feel the weight of the townspeople's judgment, the skepticism that had turned him from a loner into someone momentarily relatable, almost heroic. But what if he faltered? The nightmares of inadequacy resurfaced like dark clouds, but Jake pressed on, willing to grapple with uncertainty. Inside the bank, the atmosphere was stifling. Letters from the bank had become a shroud pulling down on his confidence over the past weeks, and now, waiting for the banker's arrival, he stole glances at the polished wooden accents and meticulously organized papers. It felt foreign, almost intimidating, but he reminded himself of his purpose. "Remember, stay authentic," Sarah whispered, her voice steadying his tremors. He nodded, her encouragement wrapping around the uncertainty like a warm blanket. He couldn't run from his past, each moment in this space built upon his history. Instead, he would embrace it. The mistakes, the missteps, and the lessons learned. When the banker entered, all smooth demeanor and reluctant authority, Jake squeezed Sarah's hand tightly, grounding himself. The conversation unfolded. Questions regarding projections, financial troubles, but beneath it all lay the currents of his self-worth being challenged. It wasn't until the banker made a dismissive remark about their prospects that Jake felt something shift inside, a surge of emotion that threatened to spill over. This was not just a discussion of numbers and strategies. It was a matter of existence. "Those bills represent more than just debt," Jake suddenly found himself saying, challenging the banker's composed facade. "They represent our lives, Sarah's life, my life. You're looking at a number, and I'm standing here as proof that we are so much more than that." Silence hung in the air. Jake's outburst was raw, uncomfortable, but it felt liberating. In that moment, he realized that his fear of rejection could no longer dictate his actions. Whatever response awaited him, he had broken through his own barriers, showing the vulnerable truth behind his conviction. The banker hesitated, eyes narrowing as if reevaluating the young man standing before him. Just as the tension began to morph into uncertainty, Sarah leaned in and spoke, her voice unwavering, "And we won't give up. Not today, not ever." What followed next was just as uncertain for Jake as it had been for the banker. Were they finally standing on even ground, or had he stirred the banker's opinions irrevocably? Jake held his breath, unsure of what might come next. Would they find a way forward, or would they have to battle yet again in the shadow of defeat? With every beat of his heart, he knew that they had crossed a threshold, and the true test of their partnership had only just begun. As the silence lingered, Jake felt an unfamiliar urgency ignite within him. The banker's skepticism lay in stark contrast to the raw determination coursing through his veins. Although he had just placed his heart on the table, it wasn't merely the banker's response he was anxious about. He was equally concerned about how to respond if the banker's walls didn't come tumbling down. The banker cleared his throat, visibly reevaluating his notes. It was nearly palpable, the shift within him, a weight shifting on a scale, one side tipping slowly back toward understanding instead of cold dismissal. Jake seized the moment, aware that they had reached a pivotal point. "You might see papers and profits," Jake said, letting the firmness of his voice take control. "But the reality is that ranches are not about numbers. They're about families, about history, roots deeply embedded in this land. You may not understand that, but I hope you will." With every word, he was not only defending the ranch, but also his own narrative. He was transforming before Sarah's eyes, evolving from a boy haunted by doubt to a man asserting his existence. Jake's direct challenge forced him to confront the tension between vulnerability and resolve, each side awakening something deep within. The banker shifted in his chair, his polished demeanor cracking ever so slightly, revealing a glimmer of humanity. "I'm aware that owning a ranch is sometimes much more than finances, but But you're still worried about losing your money. Fair enough. So are we, Jake interjected, leaning forward. The confidence in his voice surprised him. It was like firing a bow that he hadn't known he could draw. But instead of closing the door, why not think of solutions? We're open to plans that would ensure the viability of this place. Shared profits, revised terms. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a partnership. Sarah's eyes met his, wide with admiration and encouragement. In that moment, he silently vowed to channel the anxiety that had governed him for far too long into this appeal that was no longer about naivety. He had stepped into unfamiliar territory, but fear was no longer a ruler over him. Why should I take that kind of risk for a maybe? The banker's voice had shifted to challenge again, yet there was a flicker of curiosity behind his cautious eyes. You see, in my world, numbers reign supreme. Jake raised his chin, contemplating the truth of this world. Because we're more than a maybe. We're a family fighting for our lives. Let us show you that loyalty has a price worth paying. He felt the walls once again begin to close in, anticipating the negative response that might ensue. But instead, he hoped to see a dawning understanding. The stakes were high, and the fear within him became an ally, fueling his resolve rather than debilitating it. As the banker surveyed them one last time, Jake held his breath, uncertain of how the equilibrium would settle. The challenge had birthed something important within him. Still, uncertainty weighed heavily. What if this newfound courage was fleeting? Would he have the fortitude to maintain it? Outside, the daylight grew more intense, the sun offering no compassion. It reflected the chaos in his mind. A moment of clarity struck. Perhaps he had always possessed this potential, hanging just out of reach, waiting for the right trigger to unleash it. As the banker scratched his chin thoughtfully, Jake wondered if he could continue to wield this newfound power not just in this encounter, but in the uncertain path that lay ahead. The banker finally spoke, and Jake strained to hear each word as if it were life or death. But behind the banker's cautious composure, could there be a chance for a breakthrough? Let's talk terms, but know this: trust is not given lightly. There it was. The door had been nudged open. Yet Jake also felt a whisper of dread. Would he and Sarah be able to handle the terms that awaited them? A flickering excitement sparked within him, but Jake understood a reality that lay beyond this moment. The journey towards redemption weighed heavily upon their shoulders. Could they rise to the occasion and ultimately stake their claim in this challenging world? The echo of doubt hung in the air as he prepared to step into the realm of salvaging not just the ranch, but his spirit. What awaited him on the other side of this emerging partnership? The very foundation of everything he understood was about to shift again, testing the resilience he had begun to cultivate. It struck him that true growth was often born from equally true sacrifice. The time had come to face yet another chapter, and Jake steeled himself for the unknown. With the banker's cautious invitation hanging in the air, Jake felt the urge to act. It was a small yet potent trigger, igniting the spark of initiative within him. The languid atmosphere of the office, once stifled by doubt, suddenly brimmed with a sense of possibility. This was no longer merely about securing funds for the ranch. It was about proving himself. "Let's get right to it then," Jake said, quickening his pace as he flipped open his notepad. Each page was filled with numbers, projections, and what he hoped showcased the potential of their venture. How do we mitigate risks while ensuring this ranch not only survives but thrives? He watched the banker, whose expression remained professional but softened into one more intrigued. The flicker of interest was a satisfying sign, a validation of his own burgeoning sense of purpose. Yet, uncertainty loomed. This transformation took immense courage, and there was a fine line between confidence and arrogance. He noticed an almost imperceptible nod from Sarah, a gesture urging him forward. "What do you have in mind?" the banker queried, his voice still laced with skepticism, but now edged with a curiosity that Jake had positioned perfectly for boosting his boldness. It starts with what's already here. We can enhance the visitor experience, turning the ranch into a destination. Think guided tours, workshops, sustainable farming practices. The narrative we've built, that is our asset. Jake's mind raced with ideas, layering potential offerings against the financial model he had prepared. We can create something bigger than ourselves. As he spoke, Jake's fear dissipated, replaced by a powerful clarity that flowed through him. He recalled the stories his father shared about the ranch, the sweat and toil, the nights spent huddled under the stars talking about dreams. Each word he spoke was imbued with urgency, saturated with purpose, and edged with the fierce desire to honor that legacy. The banker leaned forward, his skepticism fading. Your proposal is ambitious. It requires investment, and not just in dollars. Time, dedication, the kind of work that can break a man if it fails. Jake allowed the weight of that truth to settle within him. He was no stranger to hard work, and that grind was what had forged him into the man he was becoming. Believe me, I'm ready to put in the hours. This isn't just about me. It's about Sarah and our future. Declaring their commitment became another anchor for his resolve, a reminder of their shared dreams. But what happens if our partnership goes awry? You understand that I can't afford to gamble on faith alone, the banker said, an edge of challenge threading through his tone. Jake felt a flicker of doubt, but quashed it, grounding himself in the knowledge that fear could either paralyze or propel him. Then let's agree on a trial. 6 months to evaluate our strategies and measure our results. If it fails, I'll carry that burden alone. But if we elevate this ranch, it's a win-win. He hadn't anticipated the assertion of such terms could feel so liberating. A trial period? The banker echoed, contemplating the proposition. Yes, it gives you a layer of protection, a way to mitigate the risk, Jake replied, internalizing the power dynamic shifting slightly in his favor. The thought of allowing potential success felt enticing yet daunting. He recognized that both hope and anxiety thrived in the unknown. Very well. Let me consider this, the banker said, shifting back in his chair with a mix of deliberation and calculation. The challenge still loomed, yet a new alignment of purpose flickered between them. As they allowed the silence to settle again, Jake felt the intensity of the moment crash within him. Was this the turning point he had been longing for? Or was it merely a false dawn? His heart raced with both exhilaration and concern. Time felt stretched thin as anticipation crackled in the air. The balance between risk and reward felt more fragile than ever. Should he lay his heart bare once more, echoing his vulnerability as a strength? Or was that too much exposure for the fragile alliance they were forging? Facing the uncertainty of tomorrow was never easy. Was he prepared to bear the mantle of leadership, amidst the whispers of self-doubt creeping in? Nothing was certain, and with the stakes catapulting higher, Jake understood that navigating this new territory would not be for the faint of heart. Could he summon the resilience once more, as the road ahead twisted and turned just beyond what was visible? The decision loomed like a heavy cloud, promising rain or a chance for growth, and with it surfacing a revelation he couldn't ignore. Real transformation awaited not in comfort, but in risk. How would he respond when the full weight of that risk bore down upon him, threatening to unravel everything he envisioned? Jake returned home, his mind still wrestling with thoughts from the meeting. The late afternoon sun cast golden rays through the ranch's open windows, but it hardly penetrated the storm swirling within him. He stepped inside the modest living room, where the familiar scent of cedar mingled with the richer aroma of the stew simmering in the kitchen. Sarah was at the stove, her back to him, fingers deftly chopping vegetables. "Hey you," she said, glancing over her shoulder. Her voice had a warmth that momentarily eased the tension in his chest. "Hey," he replied, the word barely escaping his lips as he leaned against the doorframe, absorbing the tranquil scene. Yet beneath that calm facade, his heart raced. The weight of the banker's response still pressed heavily on him. Was it courage or just a desperate hope pushing him forward? What's on your mind? She turned fully, and the smile on her face faded just a little, signaling she sensed his inner turmoil. Just thinking about the proposal, he began, choosing his words carefully. I pitched the trial, and he seemed interested in the idea, but... He still holds the cards. I can feel it. Sarah put down the knife, her eyes narrowing in thought. You're not used to handing over any control, are you? The unfiltered truth struck him like a blow, igniting a blend of embarrassment and realization. No, I'm not. He ran a hand through his hair. But I need this. For us. I've got to make it work. Then let's make it work. Sarah's voice was firm, solid as the ground beneath his feet. What can I do to help? A wave of gratitude surged through him. Being here, believing in it, he said, feeling the gravity of his commitment deepen. But is it enough? More than enough. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his, grounding him. But if we're truly going to make this ranch thrive, you need to believe in yourself as much as you believe in the vision you've just proposed. The essence of her words lingered, lodging deep within him. Was this the moment he needed to embrace? Acknowledging his own capabilities was a leap he had yet to take. I've never seen myself as a leader, he admitted, surprising even himself with the confession. I've always done what was expected, followed the path laid out for me. But this is different. Exactly, her voice softened. You're not just following anymore. You're ready to carve your own path. What about your father's voice in your head? The one that always told you to aim high, to keep dreaming. There it was, the unyielding spirit of his father flickering at the corner of his memories. You're right. He believed I could achieve more. What if I stopped second-guessing myself? What if I leaned into that voice instead? The thought electrified him, igniting an inner fortitude he hadn't recognized before. But as soon as the spark flared, another shadow loomed large, self-doubt. Questions bombarded his mind. Would the banker take him seriously? Was he really ready to lead the charge in transforming this struggling ranch? But what if I fail? What if I can't handle it? The weight of his childhood fears threatened to surface, but he would not allow them to define him. Then we learn, Sarah replied, the steadfastness in her voice making her seem stronger than ever. We reevaluate, adjust, and keep pushing forward. Isn't that what life is? A series of trials? Jake reflected on her words. The truth of it resonated, awakening a desire to cultivate resilience. Failure was simply another lesson, another stepping stone to success. His heart steadied, a newfound determination laced in every thought. He leaned forward, reeling with enthusiasm. Let's do it. Let's make this ranch into a destination. That trial period won't just be for the banker, it'll be for us too. I'm all in, Sarah responded, the fierce rallying in her eyes igniting the room's warmth. He took a deep breath, the weight on his shoulders shifting. Jake was becoming a force, settling into his skin as a leader, ready to embrace the stepping stones towards something bigger. But standing on the brink, he wondered, what other sacrifices would he need to make to ensure success? Even as excitement surged, uncertainty still lingered, a reminder that the journey ahead would not be smooth. The challenge was laid out before him, an ever-present grip of tension and hope intertwining. The moment of realization had come. The path to personal growth would not arrive without testing everything he thought to be true about himself. Would he rise to meet the daunting trials ahead, or would the shadows of doubt steal the resolve he had only just begun to cultivate? Jake awoke to the sound of rain tapping against the window, a rhythmic reminder of the storms that often brewed above the ranch. The previous night's exhilaration had given way to the weight of a new day. He rolled out of bed, determination coursing through him as he recalled his promise to Sarah. Today was pivotal. He needed to confront his doubts and channel the energies he had just begun to recognize. In the kitchen, the air was filled with the comforting aroma of coffee, and Sarah sat at the table, looking over some old notes. She had a fierce focus about her, and it sparked something in Jake. "What's on the agenda today?" he asked, pouring himself a mug and settling across from her. "I was thinking we could revisit your proposal. Let's break down the numbers and think about what you need to present," she replied, her eyes bright with encouragement. Jake nodded, the enthusiasm building inside him. "I spoke with Ellen from the community co-op yesterday. She mentioned a few potential investors who might be keen on sustainable ranching initiatives. If I can present a solid plan, it could be a game changer." "Perfect. That's the spirit. Let's use those insights to build a robust case," Sarah encouraged, the kind of belief she instilled in him becoming infectious. As they dove into the planning, Jake found himself more engaged than ever. Each figure he diligently calculated was not just another number. They represented the life he was striving to build. Yet beneath that fervor, self-doubt lingered like an uninvited guest. The shadow of failure loomed larger as they discussed the expectations he would face. What would happen if the investors turned them down? What if Sarah's faith in him proved misplaced? "Jake, listen!" Sarah's voice broke through his spiraling thoughts. "Failure isn't the end. It's part of the process. Your father didn't fear it. He learned from it. And so can you." Her unwavering confidence served as an anchor against the tides of uncertainty. "I know. I've got to embrace the potential for setbacks," Jake replied, a sense of resolve tugging at him. "I'll turn those fears into my driving force. It's just, sometimes it feels like I'm racing against time, and the stakes are too high." "We're in this together," she reassured him, her hand brushing against his. Their focus shifted back to the proposal. As they collaborated, Jake started to sketch out a vision, one that resonated with both sustainability and community involvement. He found himself animating every point, articulating thoughts with increasing confidence, the storm of self-doubt inside him slowly dissipating into clarity. The mountain before him didn't seem insurmountable anymore. It felt like an opportunity to test his mettle. Later the rain eased, and Catherine, the banker's assistant, arrived for their scheduled appointment. Anxiety squeezed Jake's lungs as he prepared for the conversation. He had gone over every detail, but was that enough? Standing outside the banking office, he caught sight of Sarah watching him from the car, and that grounding presence brought a flood of reassurance. He opened the door, deep breaths fueling his steps as he approached Catherine. The meeting began, and he navigated through the questions with a calculated mix of confidence and vulnerability. But as the conversation progressed, it became clear that the banker's interest was faltering. Jake had expected some pushback, yet it was the dismissive glance, the way Catherine checked her watch, that cut deeper than he anticipated. Before the meeting concluded, he felt the instinct to pivot the conversation, to weave in the lessons he'd been learning, but doubt crept back in, threatening to undermine every ounce of growth he claimed to have fought for. Would he risk it all now? "Wait!" Jake found his voice just as Catherine prepared to end the meeting. "I believe in this vision, but more importantly, I believe in what it represents for my community. Today, I stepped into my father's legacy, and I refuse to let it slip through my fingers without a fight." The room fell silent. Both Catherine and her colleague turned to him, surprise mingling with curiosity. The stakes had escalated. As Jake left the office, adrenaline pumping through his veins, he realized that he had taken a pivotal step not just for the ranch, but for himself. He had confronted his old fears head-on, sparking a transformation he hadn't planned for. How would they respond to this newfound resolve? Would it be enough to shift the conversation in his favor, or would his emotional outpouring become yet another hurdle to navigate? The air outside was damp, thick, with emerging possibilities as Jake stepped away from the banking office, each footfall echoing an internal seismic shift. He had crossed an invisible boundary, one that separated the familiar territory of self-doubt from a new land of newfound conviction. With each stride, he replayed his words in his mind, the rush of adrenaline blurring the edges of doubt and self-assuredness. Returning to the car, the tension emulated from him like heat from the asphalt. Sarah's face brightened as he slid into the passenger seat. "How did it go?" she asked, her eyes searching his for clues. I think I surprised them. At least I took a stand." The weight of those words hung in the air, filling the small space with hope and uncertainty. "Good. You did more than that, Jake. You asserted what you believe in," she smiled, but her gaze flickered with concern. "What happens next?" In that moment, Jake confronted his own feelings again. The notion of win or lose felt alien and abstract. It was the act of stepping forward, of claiming his authority, that propelled him. "I guess it's just the waiting, right? But I can't sit still anymore." Jake pivoted from the past hour's emotion, grasping for something tangible. "Let's look at how we can refine the proposal further," he suggested, fueled by an urgency to keep moving, to keep evolving. They drove back to the ranch in silence, his mind racing with ideas. The ranch, a living entity, wrapped around them as it had countless times before, but this time it felt different, like it was alive in the process of transformation, much like himself. Hours turned into an intricate dance of discussions and debates, mapping out their future. As evening fell, the weight of the day settled, revealing a mixture of exhilaration and fatigue. Jake leaned back, allowing himself a rare moment of vulnerability in front of Sarah. "What if it wasn't enough? What if their response isn't what we need?" "Then we iterate," she replied, resolute. "Every setback can become part of the narrative. Don't forget that learning is in the journey, not just the destination." Jake admired her steadfastness. It was, in fact, a validation of his choices, igniting the drive to build something greater. They spent the next few days transforming the proposal into a doc of clarity and intention. The figures became symbols of their aspirations, the words woven into a tapestry narrating not just numbers, but a vision for the future. The week rolled on, filled with early mornings and later nights. Each day, Jake dedicated himself to the nuances he once had brushed aside. He connected with like-minded individuals, people who shared insights, dreams, and occasionally their own failures. Through those connections, Jake realized he could fortify his vision while embracing the lessons hidden within discouragement. Yet, old habits tried to claw at his determination. Those whispers of inadequacy returned unbidden, reminding him of the countless reasons he could fail. During moments of solitude, when Sarah left to run errands, he would pick up his father's old journal, filled with notes and dreams of what could be. The pages felt like a distant echo of promises, fortifying his resolve. Each line documented struggles he had yet to fully appreciate, but now understood on a visceral level. "Why are you hesitating?" a voice echoed one evening, piercing through his thoughts. "You have every right to step into this legacy, Jake." The strain from the past was palpable, yet the inklings of self-belief began to emerge like new growth pushing through the earth. As days bled into each other, Jake envisioned the success of his proposal like a radiant light on the horizon. But was he prepared for everything that would come with it? He recalled Catherine's lingering gaze as he had bared his emotions in that sterile office. Would that moment, marked by vulnerability, be what shifted the balance? Or would the realities of business extinguish the flame he had fought so hard to ignite? And just as clarity began to settle, a notification pinged on his phone. An email from Catherine, the subject line simple but electrifying. Update on investment proposal. Jake hesitated, heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. This was it. Would he find affirmation or another obstacle testing the mettle he was still trying to cultivate? As he took a deep breath, caught between hope and anxiety, the decision loomed. Was he ready to face what lay ahead, no matter the outcome? Jake stared at the screen, the blinking cursor a portal to either validation or rejection. Every doubt he'd pushed aside began to resurface, gnawing at the edges of his newfound confidence. He thought he had moved past his old fears, yet the email felt like a confrontation with his former self, a reminder of uncertainty and hesitation. Clenching his fists, he clicked open the email. The words unfurled before him, precise and methodical. Catherine had acknowledged their discussions, outlining areas where they had excelled and poignant notes on what still needed refinement. Each line triggered a different emotion: pride in their progress, anxiety over adjustments, and a flicker of disappointment at the mention of competitive challenges. "This is it," he murmured to himself, a mix of resolve and trepidation washing over him like ice water. Would he let this criticism dampen his spirit or propel him further? He set the phone down, his mind racing. Each critique felt more like an invitation than a setback, a path toward growth he could decide to follow rather than a weight dragging him down. Nevertheless, the specter of self-doubt loomed. What if he wasn't equipped to face these challenges? Suddenly, the room felt confining. He stood up, pacing as he collected his thoughts. This was not a solitary endeavor. It had always been a collaboration with Sarah, and perhaps he had not leaned on her enough in these pivotal moments. That realization struck him like a lightning bolt, igniting a new understanding of leadership, not the solitary pursuit he had envisioned, but the art of harnessing collective strengths. He grabbed his jacket and made for the door, deciding that he needed to discuss Catherine's feedback with Sarah right away. Discussions over spreadsheets and projections faded behind him, as the drive back to the ranch evoked an urge to be proactive, to transform uncertainty into action. Upon arrival, he found Sarah in their makeshift office, earbuds in, immersed in her own work. Her concentration was palpable, as was the camaraderie flowing between them. For a brief moment, Jake paused and observed her. It struck him that she was not only an ally, but a pillar in this journey. When he finally spoke, his voice was steady. "I just read Catherine's feedback. We have more work to do, but it feels different this time, like we're being invited to take part in a bigger conversation." Sarah raised an eyebrow, pulling out her earbuds. "What do you mean?" "Rather than avoid the critique, we can respond to it. It's a chance for us to refine our vision, to show we're adaptable. I want to address those points together." The gleam in her eyes revealed she understood the significance of this shift. "Absolutely. Let's turn this into an opportunity. We'll refine each element and make it a representation of our growth." That evening was a whirlpool of ideas. Discussions flowed seamlessly, moving beyond mere adjustments to the proposal and weaving in the essence of their cooperative spirit. The skills they each brought to the table, their shared history, and most importantly, their ambition. Every suggestion sparked more creativity, and with every bit of input, Jake felt the pressure of past insecurities dissolve. Yet, as he deepened this partnership, a new tension crept in. Would they truly be prepared to face the looming scrutiny from investors who might challenge their ideas? The thought of others assessing their capabilities sent shivers down his spine. Public rejection had always been a personal fear. A heavy silence followed a particularly heated exchange about projections, both of them hoping to strike a balance between optimism and realism. "What if we miss the mark?" Jake asked, his voice low. "What if we can't meet the expectations?" Sarah paused, her gaze softening. "Jake, the moment we decide to put ourselves out there, we acknowledge both the possibility of failure and the opportunity for growth. We've already made strides together. Our learning will carry us through." Her words threaded a sense of hope and renewed conviction into his heart. There was beauty in their evolving partnership, and as they worked late into the night, what surged within him was more than just pragmatism. It was inspiration. Each glance they shared became a silent pact to embrace whatever challenges lay ahead. But as they finalized their revisions, the specter of that very challenge loomed larger than ever. If they were to present their revised proposal, they had to brace themselves not only for approval, but also the potential for a harsh truth that could alter their course. Jake took a steadying breath, revitalized by their collective effort, yet acutely aware that the next step might test everything they had built. The moment had arrived to face their vision head-on. Would it ignite a fire or be met with a chilly reception? In that tension hung a new email notification, the subject line dark and enticing. Confirmation of presentation date. Time was slipping away, and uncertainty twisted like smoke around his mind, demanding clarity. Was he and they together ready to seize this moment? Jake stood on the threshold of the ranch, the sun casting long shadows across the land that had felt both alien and familiar. Today was the day. He was about to present his refined proposal to the bank again, a milestone not just for the ranch, but for everything he had fought to become. The air thrummed with anticipation, electrifying his resolve. Inside, Sarah was already at the table, meticulously laying out their notes, her concentration a comforting presence. "Ready for today?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with determination. "Yeah, more than ready," Jake responded, his voice steadier than he felt. The lingering weight of doubt shifted, and beneath it flickered the flame of newfound confidence. They spent the morning absorbing the material, reinforcing every aspect of their joint vision, which had morphed from mere survival into a vibrant tapestry of possibility. Each statistic and strategy represented hundreds of hours of collaboration, respect, and trust that they had cultivated in their shared struggle. As they arrived at the bank, a familiar mix of excitement and anxiety enveloped him. He recognized the significance of this moment, not just for the ranch, but for himself. The stakes were no longer just financial, they encompassed the life he envisioned with Sarah by his side. This was the culmination of every decision, every bold word he had spoken since stepping beyond his self-imposed isolation. When they entered the conference room, Jake felt the eyes of the banker and her assistant scrutinize him. The sterile atmosphere buzzed with tension, but he reminded himself of the support and partnership he had forged with Sarah. Every challenge they had faced loomed large in his memory, but he would not let them engulf him. Once seated, the banker wasted no time. "We've reviewed your adjustments," she stated, her tone neutral but analytical. "You've made some intriguing proposals, but I need to know, can you deliver on these visions?" Jake felt the familiar panic claw at his insides, but this time he refused to let it show. Taking a steadying breath, he leaned forward. "We've structure and commitment behind every aspect of this plan. I'm ready to back it with hard work and our shared vision. This is not just about the ranch's survival. It's about what it can become, a community stronghold and a lifeline for us both." The words poured out of him, unrestrained and authentic. In that moment, he was not just a mountain man defending a legacy. He was a leader, confident in his purpose. He could see the guarded skepticism flicker in the banker's eyes, and it motivated him further. "Consider the shift we can achieve," he continued, sharing their projections with palpable enthusiasm. "Each data point stands for dreams, for our commitment to build a future rooted deeply in hard work. Sarah and I are not just proceeding out of need, we are cultivating a pathway forward." As he spoke, he felt a connection forming not only with Sarah, but also with the banker, an understanding that this wasn't about the numbers, but rather about shared values and belief in potential. After detailing their commitment to sustainable practices, improving local resources, and inviting community investments, Jake allowed silence to reign for a moment, gauging the reactions before proceeding. The pause stretched, every second poignant like a heartbeat. "You've transformed your proposal into a story," Catherine finally remarked, glancing at her colleague for confirmation. "But stories must connect to practical outcomes. If you truly believe, how will you assure accountability?" Jake took a deep breath, feeling the weight of this question, but also warmth toward Sarah's reassuring presence beside him. "We will set up monthly benchmarks, inviting transparency and adjustments. This is about building trust. We're not simply asking for the financial backing, we're pledging a collaborative journey." At that moment, it became clear to Jake that he had stepped into a new era of himself. The man who had once lived beneath a shroud of grief and doubt was now carving a legacy built on integrity and cooperation. As Catherine nodded slowly, her eyes softened, and he felt a shift, a seam of hope woven into the atmosphere. "Yes, I think we can work with these terms," she said, folding her hands together, the lines of her face not quite masking the spark of genuine interest. "We like the changes, and we're willing to proceed. We'd like to draft an agreement for the trial period under your proposed terms." Jake blinked, processes spiraling within him. They had crossed from proposal into partnership. His leap of faith had ignited tangible possibilities. Exhilaration coursed through him, mixed with disbelief. Moments earlier, he had feared this space more than anything. Returning to the ranch, the sun shone brighter as they left the confines of the banking office, exhilarating relief washing over them. Sarah turned to him, her eyes shimmering with pride. "You did it, Jake. I knew you had it in you." Her confidence ignited a series of warm reflections within him. He had indeed transformed. He recognized that stepping outside of fear was not just about confronting others, but also about reconciling his own past with the strength of his current ambitions. Together, they had carved a path rooted in resilience, where their struggles became the very fabric of their bond. In the aftermath of their achievement, Jake felt solid confidence settle into his core, a recognition that he was no longer the man shaped only by hardship, but one who had chosen to grow beyond it. As he gazed across the landscape surrounding their ranch, he could see not just a homestead, but potential, a future forged through collective effort and championed by unwavering support. In that moment, he vowed that this was merely the beginning, not only for the ranch, but for the lives they would build intertwined. His commitment, no longer a burden but a beacon, led him forward. He realized the isolation had transformed, and in its wake, he had risen, having laid down a foundation upon which he would continue to build. Now was the time for all true champions of personal growth to gather around and share the essence of this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support, and don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.